In this video, we'll install VS Code and look at some of the basic features of the user interface. So in order to get VS Code, you want to go to code.visualstudio.com. And then from there, you'll download the version of VS Code that's suitable for your operating system. So I'm on Windows, so I'm going to go ahead and download it for Windows. Now that VS Code is installed, I think the place to start is to open a folder. So in the start menu here, or up top here under File, you'll select Open Folder. And so on my desktop, I'm going to create a folder, and I'm going to call this folder VS Code Test. Okay, now I have this folder. I'm going to double click on it, select the folder. And so now the folder should appear over here. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is add some files over here to this Explorer. So if you double click this little two pieces of paper, it opens up the Explorer and you can add files in here. So one way to do it is to right click in this Explorer area and create a new file. So we'll add a test.txt file. We'll right click again and add another file. Let's call this mypython.py file for a Python file. Let's create another text file. Let's call it test.2txt. And then let's create one more. Let's just say myweb.html. So there we go. We have 4 files here. And of course, if we wanted to add folders, we could do that. Again, we would right click and add a new folder. So let's just call this one text files. So now you can take these 2 text files and drag them into your text files folder. Now with respect to these different files, as long as VS Code can handle them, then you can just go ahead and start typing away. So in our first text file, we might say hello world. In our second text file, we might say goodbye world. In our mypython.py, let's print hello world. So in this case, we're writing print. Then we have an open parentheses, close parentheses, and then hello world. Finally, in our myweb.html file, let's create a paragraph element and then write hello world. So now we have a little something in each one of these 4 files. And you'll notice that each one of those 4 files are up here. Now notice that there are 4 tabs at the top here. And in each one of those tabs, we have our files. And our files are not saved. To save these files, we can go up here to File at the top and then select Save. Another option is, and this is under test2.txt, is just to hit Control S, and that will also, or Option S, and that will save the file. So I'm going to go ahead and save each one of these files. The next thing to take a look at, in addition to the File Explorer, is the search feature. So there's a little magnifying glass here that allows you to search. So if we go ahead and click on that, we can search some text. And so let's write hello world. And you'll notice that 3 of our files have the phrase hello world in there. Now, of course, you could search text in the normal way. You would hit Control F. That would bring up a little search box here. And you could write hello world. And this search here is searching just this mypython.py, just the file that I have open. I could shift over here and say, okay, wait, I'm going to search for hello world and test2 and nothing comes up. When I go over to the myweb.html, the hello world pops up. And then one final way to search is if you hit Control or Command P, and then you can search for specific files. So let's search for our .txt files by writing .txt. And so this will show us the .txt files that we have in our workspace or folder. The next thing to take a look at are extensions. If you take a look off to the left here, there are 4 little boxes, and one box is kind of separated from the other 3. And if you select that, it'll pull up extensions. Basically, all an extension is it extends the functionality of VS Code. So let's say we wanted to work in Python. There might be a number of extensions that we want to add in order to make it easier to work in Python in VS Code. So let's take a look at the most popular one right here, which is this IntelliSense. So we see a couple things about this. One is it's produced by Microsoft. 2, that it has 73 million downloads. And then we can kind of scroll through and see what it includes. So I'm going to go ahead and just install this. Now, if I wanted to go ahead and disable it so it doesn't work, I could click the disable button here, or the uninstall if I wanted to remove it. Let's look at one more extension, and this is VS Code -icons. Now I'm going to go ahead and select this VS Code icons, and I see it has 12 million downloads. It's by this VS Codes icons team, and I'm going to go ahead and download this. Now, after I've downloaded it, it's prompting me to set my icons, but I'm going to keep the icons that I currently have, which is this SETI, Visual Code. We'll come back to this in a minute. The next thing I want to point out is this gear down here, which says manage when you hover over it. So let's go ahead and hover over that. So there's a couple of things to take a look at. One is if you wanted to change the theme or the colors of VS Code, you could select the color theme. So let's select this solarized light. Currently you have this dark Visual Studio, but let's select this solarized light. Now you see that it radically changed the theme here. And at least for me, this is kind of blinding. So I'm going to go back and select the gear color theme, and then I'm going to change it back to Visual Studio. Next, go over and click this manage button, this gear, and select file icon theme. Now earlier what I did was download a set of icon packs, which basically changed the icons associated with the different files. Right now I have this SETI Visual Studio Code. I'm going to go ahead and select the icons I downloaded from the extensions. And this is VS Code icons. So I don't really see anything at first, but if I go back to the Explorer here, I'll notice that these little icons to indicate the file type have changed, and they're definitely more visually appealing now. Next, let's go back to this manage and go over to settings. One thing we might want to do is increase the font size. So notice that the settings is open in this tab at the top. So let's take a look at test2.txt, and this says goodbye world. Now I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this a couple times just so it's easier to see. So now we have 5 lines of goodbye world. Back to the settings you can access at the top here. We'll change the font size. Let's make it something dramatic to 36. Now if we go back to test2.txt, we can see that those 5 lines of goodbye world are humongous now. But that's too much, so let's change it to something a little bit more reasonable, which is 22. With this particular file open, the next thing I'm going to do is just to repeat this goodbye world a number of times on this particular line. And one thing that becomes apparent is that this text is not wrapping. So one thing I might want to do is to change this. So back into the settings, I can click either the tab up here, but I'll go back to the gear and then select settings. And I can, in the search settings, type word wrap, and you can turn the word wrap on or off. So I might say, you know what, I want to turn it on. And if I go back to the test2.txt, I could see that once my line 1, which extended almost onward forever, is now wrapping. Now, for some settings, you might want to turn them on and off depending upon what you're doing. So for example, word wrap, I can use a shortcut and turn it on and turn it off or turn it back on. So there are many shortcuts for VS Code. So let's take a look at how to view them. Again, we'll go back down to this manage, this gear here, and we'll select keyboard shortcuts. Now, if you look through here, you can see a number of commands, and many of them have a key binding, but eventually you'll find a bunch of commands that do not have bindings associated with them. So here you can kind of play around a little bit. You can reset a binding, you can add a binding to a command that doesn't already have one. But in our case, we want to just look up a shortcut, and our shortcut is word wrap. And so we could see that the shortcut for word wrap is Alt-Z. And so if we go back to our test2.txt and press Alt-Z, it turns it off, and then Alt-Z again turns it on. Let's look at one more shortcut. So the shortcut I want to look at, and I'm just going to type this in the search, is Zen mode. So if I look at the shortcut for Zen mode, I can toggle it on and off with Control K and then Z, and then I can exit Zen mode with escape. And you can see that this particular shortcut only works while I'm in Zen mode. So let's go to our text2.txt file, and then we'll press Control K and then Z, which enters into Zen mode. And then we can either press Control K and Z to exit, because this is a shortcut that toggles Zen mode on and off, or we can simply press escape, and this will exit Zen mode. So I pressed escape there. The last thing I want to point out, and this goes a little bit beyond the basics, is how to run a file in VS Code. So let's go back to our mypython.py file. And we have this command, which is to print hello world. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, so this is a little bit easier to read. And I'm zooming in with Control+. And you'll notice that there is a play button up top here. and it says to run the Python file when I hover over it. So if I go ahead and press that, the terminal pops up, and what happens is the terminal spits out this string, hello world. So in this video, we installed VS Code and looked at some of the basic features of this program.